Hear the clatter of casserole lids, the laughter rising in a wood-paneled living room, and the sweet, almost buttery aroma wafting past bowls of green bean casserole topped with crispy onions. Glittering cranberry jello molds jiggle by the punch bowl, and someone just set down a pineapple upside-down cake crowned with glowing maraschino cherries. What happened to these dishes? Why did they vanish? And could dusting off a lost recipe bring back more than just retro flavors? Step into a 1970s Christmas potluck, and the first thing you'd see is the appetizer table. A riot of color, texture, and retro shapes. Think about this for a second. It's not just food, but an invitation. Bright-eyed kids zip in for their favorite bites, and grown-ups try to sneak a nibble before everyone else. These appetizers were the spark that started the party, setting the mood with each platter and every toothpick treat. So, let's wander over and take a look, not just at what these dishes were, but why they stirred up such excitement. Let's start with a classic deviled eggs. Picture a giant aluminum tray, all lined up with perfect, creamy yellow mounds. The eggs are halved, their yolks mashed smooth with mayonnaise, a dash of tangy yellow mustard, a sprinkle of sweet relish, and a touch of salt and pepper. Some families tossed in a splash of vinegar for extra brightness, others swirled in a little paprika on top, visible red dust that made the eggs pop against a bed of lettuce. Deviled eggs were easy to pick up, totally irresistible, and a guaranteed hit. At every holiday gathering, they disappeared before you knew it. Why? Because they felt fancy, but anyone could make them. There was nothing like biting into one. The creamy richness, the little snap of flavor, the cool egg white, savory and comforting all at once. Guests would often hover around the tray, joking, "Better grab one now," or "Uncle Ron will snatch 'em all." And there'd always be that one person who insisted, "Nobody makes them like Grandma did. She whips the yolks extra smooth." Next up, the cheese ball, a true sign that this wasn't just a normal Tuesday dinner. The cheese ball came out wrapped in plastic, then got rolled in chopped nuts, maybe parsley or bacon bits if someone felt adventurous. Inside, you'd find a blend of soft cream cheese, shredded cheddar, green onion, and sometimes a splash of Worcestershire sauce for grown-up depth. The cheese ball wasn't just food, it was a centerpiece, perched on a plate ringed by Ritz or Buttery Club crackers. Every time someone sliced a wedge, the room buzzed. Who brought the cheese ball? Was it Aunt Linda or Mrs. Hampton from 2 doors down? And then there was the reckless moment someone double-dipped, and the table exploded in laughter. Even after the ball had been hacked down to a little lumpy wedge, nobody wanted to be the one to take the last bit. In my house, we'd have a playful debate over who'd finally go for it, with someone joking, "If you do it, you get the wish." Now, shrimp cocktail. This was the dish that made kids wrinkle their noses and grown-ups feel fancy. Imagine a glass bowl packed with pink shrimp, tails curled over crushed ice, all circling a smaller dish brimming with red cocktail sauce. Lemon wheels perched precariously on the rim, and little sprigs of parsley sat like green fireworks for color. The idea was simple, but it felt downright elegant. People would spear a shrimp, give it a dunk, and for a second, the kitchen would fall quiet as someone savored one bite, cold and zingy with horseradish. Even the fussiest uncle got excited about shrimp cocktail, usually with a "don't mind if I do." And sometimes, a little competition broke out. Who could pile the highest stack of shrimp on their cocktail plate before getting a warning look from Mom? More than just the food, the way these dishes were set out told their own story. Tables would be lined with shiny silver trays, rescued from the back of the cabinet, special for the holidays only. Frilly toothpicks came in all the boldest colors, sticking out of cubes of cheddar and salami, or piercing through olives and pickled onions. Platters might be draped in lacy paper doilies that only appeared once a year. People brought out their best dishes, often mismatched, but always loved: pink Pyrex, blue and gold Corningware, the occasional crystal serving bowl. It was as if every family emptied their cabinets just to make the table sparkle for this one night. Someone might say, "I remember this tray from Grandpa's house," while tracing their finger around a faded monogram, connecting generations through something as simple as a serving dish. And that first moment when the guests walked in, shedding their scarves, shaking the cold from their boots, was unforgettable. You could see eyes widen, jaws drop just a little, laughter bubble out. "Oh, who made those?" Or "That looks too pretty to eat." It was a sense of pride. The appetizers didn't just kick off the meal, they started the party. Sometimes, guests would hover near the appetizer table, swapping memories. "Remember last year's cheeseball flop?" Someone might say, grinning. Speaking of flops, let me tell you about one memorable year at our family's Christmas potluck. Mom had decided to go all out with her own new appetizer, a shrimp and avocado aspic. She worked for hours, pouring bright green gelatin into a fancy ring mold, suspending neat rings of hard-boiled egg, shrimp, and slices of avocado in a wobbly sea. She slid the massive mold out of the fridge, and, for a second, it glistened under the kitchen light, like glass from another world. But then, disaster. The mold didn't want to come loose. She jiggled, tapped, then finally gave it a hearty shake, and the whole thing slid out with a wet splat. Not on the platter, but upside down on the counter. The room fell silent for one beat. Then, we all burst out laughing, even Mom. We scooped it back together, replated it, and tried it anyway. I'll be honest, nobody finished their slice. But it became legendary. Now, every year, someone asks if she'll try the jellyfish salad again. It's proof that at these parties, even disasters can turn into family traditions. And honestly, it's those imperfect moments that stick in your memory the most. The big blunders, the shared giggles, the wild flavors no one was expecting. After the nerves and giggles came the chatter. People compared kitchen tricks. Should you use Miracle Whip or real mayo in deviled eggs? Should the cheese ball be spicy or mild? Someone always had a secret ingredient, like smoked paprika or a squirt of lemon juice, passed down from some mysterious great aunt in Cleveland. More than once, a guest would wander over and say, "Can I get the recipe for this?" The answer, of course, was always, "Sure," but it's never exactly the same twice. If you're tempted to try these classics now, but want to keep them fresh, there are plenty of ways to modernize vintage appetizers. For deviled eggs, try swapping in fresh dill or a dash of sriracha instead of paprika. Go wild with toppings, crispy fried shallots, thin slices of radish for crunch, or even a little bit of smoked salmon. A cheese ball can be rolled in crushed roasted pistachios or blended with sun-dried tomatoes for color. If you want to wow folks who aren't into seafood, make a vegetarian shrimp cocktail using roasted hearts of palm and tangy vegan cocktail sauce. Don't be afraid to play with the shapes. Serve deviled eggs on a fun patterned cutting board, or stack cheese ball bites in a mini Christmas tree shape with green onions for garland. But here's the thing. The beauty of these appetizers wasn't perfection. It was the effort, the color, and the chaos of shared bites. Who cared if something wobbled or flopped? The point was that everyone had a hand in making the night delicious and unforgettable. And while appetizers set the stage, what came out of the oven next truly defined those vintage celebrations. What hearty, bubbling classics took the spotlight after the cheese balls and deviled eggs disappeared? Well, that's where things start to sizzle. So next up, let's peek into the kitchen and discover the main dishes that really brought the vintage holiday magic to life. As the laughter died down at the appetizer table, something else started to waft through the air. Thick, warm, and almost impossible to resist. It was the unmistakable smell of Christmas dinner, bubbling and golden at the very heart of every potluck. If you remember walking through a crowded 1970s kitchen, you can almost see it. Aunt Judy at the stove, carefully lifting a casserole dish heavy with bubbling, cheese-topped green bean casserole fresh from the oven. The green bean casserole was a staple then, creamy, rich, and topped with a layer of craggy, crispy fried onions. And here's how it all came together. Open up a few cans, French-style green beans, condensed cream of mushroom soup, and pour into an enormous mixing bowl. Stir in milk, add a sprinkle of black pepper, Pile it all into a battered glass baking dish, and finish with a mountain of crunchy fried onions. Those ones that somehow tasted good even straight from the can. 20-30 minutes in the oven, and out came this golden, bubbling wonder. When you scooped through a crackling crust of onions into the mellow, piping hot green beans, it felt like home. Kids would try to sneak just the top off, all the while swearing that the best part was the crispy bit. Adults smiled and let them. There was plenty to go around. Every family had their own secret technique too. Maybe they'd toss in a splash of soy sauce for depth, or use fresh mushrooms if the budget allowed. Some folks went fancy with sliced almonds on top. And there were always debates. Was it better with frozen veggies or straight up canned? Those choices became little signatures. A way to say, this is our version. This is us. But that was just the start. If your potluck was really fancy, the ham took center stage. Imagine lifting the lid on an enormous platter, a glistening ham, sticky and pink. It sparkles, covered in a syrupy glaze of brown sugar and honey, and it's studded with whole cloves, poking out like tiny black jewels across the golden skin. The scent hits you first, sweet and spicy, with those toasty, smoky layers from hours in the oven. And then the visual. That perfect pattern of diamonds slashed into the fat. Each square tucked with a maraschino cherry and pineapple ring. Carving into the ham was almost an event itself. Grandpas would pretend to take just a tiny sliver, but by the third pass, their plates were piled high. And kids circled, hoping for the pineapple ring that tasted sweet and sticky. The ham brought everyone back for seconds, and for stories. One uncle always joked, "Every time I see these cherries, I remember your mom's meatloaf fiasco." Speaking of meatloaf, here's a quirky family favorite. In our house, it was always the main event after the ham disappeared. This wasn't just any meatloaf. It started with ground beef. Maybe some pork or veal if you wanted to be extra rich, mixed with torn white bread soaked in milk, minced onion, and a healthy handful of sharp cheddar. Mom would crack in a couple eggs, dump in dried herbs, and then, her secret move, a squirt of ketchup and a spoonful of grape jelly. It was strange, but that hint of sweet made the savory pop. She shaped it by hand, packing it tight into a flower-shaped mold or a bright red loaf pan, then topped the whole thing with stripes of ketchup and sometimes, this is true, a zigzag of yellow mustard for a festive touch. When it baked, the top went caramelized, almost crunchy, while the inside stayed juicy. Serving it, she'd slice thick slabs with a giant serving spoon, and every kid would grab for the edge piece. On the rare occasion there were leftovers, next day's sandwiches were just as exciting. I remember my cousin Julie would always stand on her tiptoes, peering over the table asking, "Did you use the fancy cheese this year, Aunt Pat?" Everyone laughed, and Aunt Pat would wink and say, "Only the good kind for you, kiddo." The kitchen always felt crowded, full of noise, the sound of laughter, serving spoons clinking against ceramic, the oven's gentle hum. Sometimes, the window would fog up from all the cooking, and someone's glasses would steam over as they leaned in to snag a sneak taste. These moments weren't just about food, they were about coming together, telling stories, and passing down traditions. Grandma would pull out her stained recipe cards, some barely readable from years of use, and walk whoever was closest through each step, saying things like, "Don't you dare skimp on the onions, that's where the flavor's hiding." There'd be debates across the table, good-natured arguments about which year the ham came out juiciest, or who accidentally left the casserole under the broiler a minute too long. Sometimes a family friend would pop in with their own specialty, a potato gratin bubbling with cream, or a sausage-stuffed bread, and everyone would squeeze in a little tighter, making sure there was room for one more dish. Now, a big part of the joy was showing off these dishes. Everything was presented for maximum drama. The ham sat in the center on a gigantic platter, steam swirling around the pineapple rings, cherries shining like jewels. Casserole dishes glowed golden under the kitchen lights. Foil covers peeled back with a little flourish. You could hear the sizzling of casseroles and bubbling cheese, the gentle clink of serving spoons, the sigh when the first portion lifted away with long strings of mozzarella. But as the decades rolled on, something changed. Families started leaning into lighter meals, maybe worried about cholesterol or just preferring fresher flavors. Suddenly, chicken breasts with lemon replaced rich meatloaf. Baked salmon took the place of honey ham. The famous casseroles? They got edged off the table for green salads or steamed veggies with vinaigrette. The main dishes shrank, portions got smaller, and what had once felt like a feast became, well, more like a spa day. There's nothing wrong with new traditions, but some of that big, comforting warmth got left behind. If you want to bring these vintage dishes back without the heaviness, there are plenty of ways to lighten things up or add a fresh twist. Swapping sour cream or Greek yogurt for canned soup and casseroles adds creaminess but cuts the richness. Try roasting your green beans before baking the casserole for a deeper flavor. Or toss in some fresh herbs to brighten things. Ham can be glazed with honey and apple cider instead of corn syrup, and you can leave out the maraschino cherries for a more natural sweetness. For meatloaf, use turkey instead of red meat, or add shredded carrots and zucchini for extra lightness and color. Instead of the old ketchup glaze, try a fancy tomato chutney or a bourbon barbecue sauce for smoky sweet flair. If you'd like an actionable starting point, why not try updating the classic green bean casserole with roasted garlic and whole wheat panko instead of fried onions? Or make a mini ham by glazing a ham steak, perfect for a small gathering. You could even turn leftover ham into a savory bread pudding for next morning's brunch. The secret to reviving these dishes isn't about copying them perfectly, it's about capturing the feeling. The joy of spooning up something hot and bubbling, the way your mouth waters while you wait your turn, the jokes and traditions that spring up around the food. The next time you're planning a holiday potluck, don't be afraid to go big. Break out an old recipe card, give it an update, or serve it just like Grandma did. The stories and the laughter will follow. Still, for every bubbling casserole and dazzling ham, the side dishes played their part too. What strange, colorful, and sometimes jiggly classics balanced out the feast? And why do so many of us remember them, even years later? Let's swing around the crowded potluck table, trays groaning under all those iconic sides, each one shouting for attention with its own wild colors and quirky shapes. If the main dishes were the stars, these sides and salads were the backup dancers that made the meal unforgettable. First up, candied yams. If you never saw a roasting pan covered in melting mini marshmallows, were you even at a 70s Christmas? Steaming orange yams bathed in brown sugar and butter, topped with a sea of foamy marshmallows that browned and blistered in the oven. The smell was almost like roasting caramel corn, warm and sweet, with that earthy note of yam underneath. Some kids scooped up just the topping, snagging as much golden goo as they could get away with. Adults would tell stories about when I was your age, one marshmallow would do. Still, nobody left the table without at least a taste, even the ones who claimed it was too sweet to be dinner. If you really want to picture it, imagine a room full of family, all squeezed around folding tables, passing that giant pan of yam. You might hear someone call out, "Save me a corner piece," or "Don't scrape off all the topping." There was always a little friendly teasing, too. "Oh, Uncle Joe just wants the marshmallow, not the yam." And when you stuck that big serving spoon in for the first scoop, you'd hear that sticky sound as the molasses and sugar gave way. Every spoonful was pure comfort, like a warm sweater for your taste buds. Next, green bean casserole's classic sidekick, those crispy onion-topped wonders. Layer after layer of green beans, once again. But this time they sometimes met up with cream sauce, crushed crackers, or slivered almonds. At some tables, you'd find extra strings of fried onions drifting onto other dishes by the end of the night, thanks to kids sneaking bites before anyone noticed. It was a dish that brought out playful rivalry, whose beans were crunchiest, whose topping stayed crisp versus mushy. Even the shape of the dish was a debate. Round Pyrex or long rectangles? My friend Tanya once told me about her family's version. Her mom swore the secret was adding toasted almonds for extra bite, and Tanya's brother always tried to steal the corner pieces, convinced they were crispier. You'd hear little negotiations happening. "I'll swap you my middle piece for your edge piece," someone would say, nudging for the crunchiest serving. Even years later, Tanya said she can still remember the distinct clatter of metal spoons scraping Pyrex, and the sound of fried onions crunching between her teeth. We can't talk sides without mentioning those notorious Jell-O and gelatin salads. Wobbly, bright, and completely unforgettable. Maybe it's a tall, clear mold with rainbow layers. Lime green at the bottom, cherry red in the middle, lemon yellow gleaming on top. Sometimes you'd spot floating fruit, canned mandarin oranges, canned pineapple tidbits, even little marshmallows or crunchy bits of celery scattered inside. The bravest cooks added cottage cheese, mayonnaise, or even shredded carrots. At our family gatherings, the annual Jell-O surprise was always a talking point. One year, Grandma made a ring mold with olives and chopped pimiento pressed right into the side. It looked more like a science experiment than a salad. Still, someone always had a second helping, and the whole table would cheer if it stood up on the plate without collapsing. The real fun was slicing it, watching it wobble and giggle, and hearing the gentle squish as each wedge hit a plate. Once, my cousin dared me to poke the tallest Jell-O mold just to see how much it would jiggle. I did, and we both burst out laughing as it bounced like a trampoline. Grandma frowned, but I like to think she was trying not to smile. When Jell-O landed on your plate, you could hear the little kids whisper, "Will it stand up? Or flop over?" And there were always extra napkins handy, just in case of a wobbly disaster. Another retro staple, ambrosia salad. Usually a swirl of canned mandarin oranges, pineapple pieces, shredded coconut, and mini marshmallows bound together with a soft, pillowy mixture of whipped topping or sour cream. Some families added maraschino cherries for that special pop of red. It was sweet and tangy, cold and chewy. The taste of Christmas afternoons sitting cross-legged on the carpet, watching It's a Wonderful Life with sticky fingers. Fruit salad was always a safe harbor too. Chunks of apple and banana. Maybe grapes or kiwi if someone was feeling bold, tossed in a little lemony syrup. It made you feel like you were getting dessert before the meal even ended. If you asked anyone at the party about their favorite side, chances are you'd start a flood of family secrets. Aunt Pauline might lean in, dropping her voice. The key is you have to chill it overnight. And don't tell anyone, but I double the coconut. Meanwhile, kids ran back and forth, poking through salads, searching for the pieces with the most marshmallows, or sneaking a cherry from the middle. Even the picky eaters couldn't resist when someone coaxed, "Just try a bite." It's a tradition. The impact of these sides wasn't just about taste. Step back for a second and look at the table. It's a patchwork quilt of color, bright green, deep orange, bold reds, and milky whites. Some dishes sparkled under the chandelier light, Jell-O, glinting like stained glass, next to hot casseroles and puffy yams. There was always something to poke, something to squish, something that crunched, and something that melted on your tongue. The visuals and smells gave every gathering a sense of being bigger, more special than just dinner. Even the hiss of the oven door opening, the thud of a spoon digging into a casserole, or the gentle wobble of a gelatin mold as it was passed down the line. These were the soundtrack of holiday memories. Many of these classics faded away as people grew more health-conscious or worried about processed food. Suddenly, people brought tossed green salads or quinoa with roasted squash, and the wild Technicolor Jell-O circles were left out. It's easy to see why folks move on, but there's something a little sad about losing all those colors, flavors, and goofy traditions. I still remember the giggles when a Jell-O salad flopped onto the floor, or the sense of pride when a new recipe held its shape for the first time. If you're tempted to bring a sideshow classic to your own gathering, it's easy to update them without losing the magic. Try baking sweet potatoes with real maple syrup and toasted pecans instead of mini marshmallows. Reimagine a green bean casserole with fresh beans, crispy shallots, and a creamy garlicky chamel sauce. For Jell-O fans, swap canned fruit for fresh berries or pomegranate seeds. Replace whipped topping with homemade whipped cream, or use Greek yogurt for a tangy kick in ambrosia. Even fruit salad can get a facelift. Try adding chopped mint or a drizzle of honey lime dressing to make the familiar feel new. And it's not just about the recipes, it's the stories too. When you bring back a classic side dish, you're also bringing back the laughter, the little accidents, the whispered kitchen secrets, and the tug-of-war over who gets the last crispy onion. Ask your parents or grandparents about their favorite potluck memories. You might be surprised by the stories you hear. Maybe you'll find out who really invented the mystery Jell-O, or discover someone's hidden talent for arranging fruit salad artfully in a bowl. The point isn't to recreate every old-school dish perfectly, but to bring the color and playfulness of vintage potlucks to the modern table. Put your own spin on it. Let the kids pile on the marshmallows, bring out the prettiest serving dish even if it clashes with everything else. Just watch how fast the laughter, and maybe a little competition for the last scoop, comes back. But even after all that, nothing capped off the night quite like the parade of desserts. What was it about those sugary, shimmering treats that made Christmas potlucks so truly unforgettable? Well, let's dig into the sweet endings next. They're classics you'll want to remember. If you thought the main course meant the end of excitement at a vintage Christmas potluck, you're about to be proven delightfully wrong. Because as plates were cleared and belts got loosened a notch, out came the parade of desserts. Glittering, gooey, tall, and proud. Even the most I couldn't possibly adult would lean in for just one more bite. Let's step into this sweet scene and see what made these retro dessert tables so dazzling. The true showstopper, every single year, was the pineapple upside-down cake. Picture this. Someone's carrying it from the kitchen. The buttery golden cake still warm. The top gleaming with sticky caramel, bright yellow pineapple rings, and those neon red maraschino cherries, sitting perfectly in each hollow. You'd hear little gasps of joy, maybe even a round of applause as the cake took its place. How hard was it to make? Not at all. Here's how it happened in almost every home. Open a can of pineapple slices and a jar of red cherries. Melt some butter with a scoop of brown sugar in the bottom of a round cake pan, then arrange pineapple rings and place a cherry in the middle of each one. Empty a box of yellow cake mix into a bowl, add oil, eggs, and the pineapple juice, stir it up, pour it on top of the fruit, and bake. When it finally came out, just a quick flip over onto a serving plate. And there it was. A glistening masterpiece that looked like holiday-stained glass. One whiff, warm sugar, citrus, the tiniest hint of almond, and suddenly everybody had room for dessert. Let me tell you about Mrs. Goldstein's version. She always added a dash of cinnamon to the mix, and sometimes tucked just a hint of grated coconut between the fruit and the cake batter. That subtle aroma would sneak into the room before the cake even appeared, making people crane their necks, nudging each other, "Is that her pineapple cake again this year?" And every time she served it, folks would crowd around to get an extra scoop of the gooey caramel corners, their forks clinking on the serving platter as they chased every last crumb. Sometimes, you'd even see cousins fighting gently, playfully, over who got the prettiest slice, the one with the most cherries. But cakes were just the beginning. Aspics and gelatin desserts were a huge hit. You'd see big domed salads, bright green lime jello filled with pineapple tidbits, maybe whipped cream folded inside. Some years, the adventurous cooks made towering ribbon molds with layers of orange, cherry, even lemon. If someone really wanted to impress, they'd suspend canned fruit in each layer. So when you cut it, it looked like edible stained glass windows sparkling under the tree lights. The wobbly jiggle got kids giggling, and adults snuck more than a portion. There was always a fun competition, whose jello stood the tallest, whose had the most punch of flavor, whose slice made the biggest wiggle on the plate. In fact, I remember my Uncle Gerald challenging the kids every year, saying, "Whoever gets the tallest jello tower to their plate in one piece gets the first pick of dessert." The room would erupt in laughter as we tiptoed across the carpet, plates outstretched, trying desperately not to let the wobbly dessert slide into a sticky mess. Brownies weren't left behind, either. Fudgy, chewy, dusted with powdered sugar, and usually cut into shockingly small squares. Because who could stop at one? They were made with real butter and always cooled just enough so you could barely pick them up. Some families tossed in walnuts. Others swirled in cream cheese for that extra tang. Boxed brownie and cake mixes were all the rage by the 70s. No more fussing with dry, crumbly cakes from scratch. Moms bragged about how quick they could whip up dessert. Just add water and stir. It was practically a holiday miracle. And it wasn't unusual to find tiny Tupperware containers tucked under the dessert table for people to sneak home a square or two, if they could beat the quick hands of dessert-loving uncles. Another favorite was the no-bake treat. Think Rice Krispie marshmallow squares. Those sticky, pull-apart chunks that squeaked when you bit into them. Or chocolate peanut butter bars layered with melting chocolate chips in a crunch that stuck in your teeth. These were the treats that kids made with just a little help, and every tray always disappeared by the end of the night. You could feel the excitement when the tray of treats landed in the middle of the crowd. Someone's grandpa would pretend not to see the sticky fingerprints on his tie, or the shouts of, "Hey, save some for grandma." No one really minded the mess after all. That was part of the joy. The air would fill with vanilla and melted chocolate, laughter and sticky little hands everywhere. All these sweets did more than just fill up plates. They brought family and friends together in ways nothing else could. You'd have 4 generations crowded around the table, fighting for their favorite piece, telling stories about Christmases past. One year, my aunt brought an earthquake cake, a wild concoction where the icing bakes inside the cake and erupts in gooey rivers. She called it a mess, but everyone demanded the recipe. Every slice was filled with laughter and little mysteries of childhood. How did Grandma get the cherries inside the cake? Did you use marshmallows this time, or whipped cream? It wasn't just sugar that made these sweets so special, it was the sense of community. You could taste the time and care put into each layer, each careful assembly. My neighbor growing up, Mrs. Arnold, always brought her banana pudding, layers of vanilla wafers and whipped cream. She said, "It's old-fashioned, but it works every time." And she was right. Even as food trends changed, and people started worrying more about sugar and carbs, it was almost impossible to say no to these desserts. But of course, by the 1980s and 90s, things got lighter and healthier. Suddenly, there were more fruit platters, angel food cakes, and light pudding cups. And yet, those classic desserts never fully disappeared. At church potlucks and school bake sales, you'd still spot that glint of Jell-O or smell a toasty marshmallow treat a mile away. There was something unbeatable about breaking into those old favorites. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe it really was the perfect combination of flavors, textures, and good memories. If you're itching to try one of these vintage treats but want to keep things a bit more modern, here's a thought. Use fresh pineapple instead of canned, or swap some whole wheat flour into the cake. Try cherries without the red dye, or drizzle a little honey into the Jell-O instead of so much sugar. Turn classic Rice Krispie treats into holiday bark with dark chocolate and toasted peanuts. Or set up a sundae bar where everyone can top their brownies with berries, coconut, and a scoop of real whipped cream. It's not just about following a recipe, it's about inviting warmth and creativity into your kitchen. The point isn't to copy the sweets exactly, but to find that spark, that sense of surprise and excitement. Grab your family, invite some friends, and see how fast everyone rushes for dessert. You don't need a perfect cake or even a wobbly Jell-O mold. That sense of laughter and togetherness, that's what's worth reviving. But here's the thing. As our tastes change and our holidays evolve, those vintage desserts leave behind echoes that are hard to forget. Could bringing back just one, maybe that bright pineapple cake or a marshmallow-packed Jell-O, rekindle some of that old magic? Or could it inspire a totally new tradition for your own table? That's what we'll take a closer look at to finish our journey through these lost potluck classics. As we stand here at the finish line of our tour through vintage Christmas potlucks, I can almost taste the buttery warmth of a green bean casserole and see the shine of that glassy Jell-O ring sparkling in the living room light. It's hard not to get nostalgic when you think about all those dishes, each one holding a story, a laugh, a memory from another time. They weren't just recipes written on yellowing cards, they were the heartbeats of family gatherings, traditions that pulled everyone together when the world outside seemed cold and quiet. There was something about the swirl of colors, the clinking of heavy serving spoons, and the parade of platters from appetizers to desserts that made every Christmas feel a little brighter. a little closer. What makes these forgotten flavors so special isn't just how they tasted. It's the way food was woven into the rituals of the season. I remember watching my mom, apron dusted with flour, mixing up cake batter with one hand and fielding questions from cousins with the other. Each time we unwrapped the ham or tried to coax Grandma's awkward Jell-O mold out of its pan, we were really unwrapping the bonds that kept our family close. There was never a perfect slice or a flawless finish, but nobody cared. If anything, the little disasters made the memories even sweeter. So you might be wondering, why did these classic recipes fade away? Health trends, busy schedules, maybe even a need for novelty all played a role. We reach for roasted vegetables or quinoa salads now, setting aside the richness of casseroles and the bright syrupy sweets of our childhood. But as we chase lighter options, something else disappears too. A sense of occasion, a kind of holiday theater you could taste and see and touch. Bringing back even one dish, even for a single gathering, can light up all those old connections again. My own family started this experiment last year. We decided to go full retro, lifting recipes straight from a 1970s cookbook for our Christmas dinner. The table looked like a rainbow, green bean casserole stacked high, candied yams glowing under marshmallow mountains, and a wiggling cherry and pineapple Jell-O ring sitting dead center. We laughed as we fumbled through the directions, giggled when the Jell-O flopped sideways, and took way too many arm-linked photos in front of the cheese ball. Some of the kids wrinkled their noses at the brown sugar ham, but others surprised us by asking for seconds. In that moment, it wasn't about loving every single flavor. It was about reliving the fun and feeling part of something larger, something handed down over generations. I want to invite you to try the same. Pick one forgotten recipe, a cheese ball, an upside-down cake, even a fruit salad stuffed with marshmallows, and bring it to your next gathering. Call up your relatives for secrets and shortcuts, let guests get their hands messy, and tell everyone the story behind the dish. You might be surprised at who lights up, who shares a childhood memory, or who makes a new one on the spot. Food, after all, isn't just fuel. It's a bridge back to the people we love and the moments we sometimes lose in the rush of modern life. And don't stop there. If you have a story, that time your deviled eggs slid straight off the platter, or your cousin tried making a dill pickle Jell-O, put it in the comments below. If there's a recipe you're itching to revive, share it with us. This channel is meant to be a kind of virtual potluck, a place to laugh and remember together, and maybe find a little courage to try a sticky sweet classic just one more time. So the next time you walk into a holiday party, maybe forgive the cheese ball its weird shape, or the Jell-O its wobble. Or better yet, bring one yourself. Every vintage recipe you dust off and serve is really an invitation, not just to taste something new or old, but to celebrate how food brings us all home, no matter where we start. Who knows what new tradition you'll create, what old story you'll hear, or what memory will get passed on at your own potluck table. And isn't that really what makes the holiday season glow?